Let's welcome him as he comes to talk to us tonight.
Right. Thanks, Russ. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Citygate. It's lovely to be back with you again. I'm glad I didn't put you off and you've come back, so that's always a good thing, isn't it? I've been away on holiday since I last saw you with my family, so that's been really nice to have a week doing very little apart from sitting in the sunshine, having the odd glass of red wine. And my wife told me off for barbecuing rabbit. Apparently I'm not allowed to because I'm English. But I said, well, I'm in France. They sell rabbit, so I'm going to have rabbit on my barbecue, if that's all right. So I did. I marinated it in orange and white wine. It was quite good, and some herbs. It was all right. So if you like white meat, like everything, it's a bit like chicken, really. So creating a culture of invitation. Do you know, when it comes to evangelism, people have polarized views. And they'll have contrasting views on what is really effective in helping people come to a place of faith in Jesus. So far down this end, you'll get the people that say, oh, it's all about just friendship. That's all it is. No, nothing else. Just be friends. And then at the other end, it's the extreme where it's no. You have to go out and confront strangers, and you have to stop people in the street and stop people on their doorsteps. And do you know what? Where I think things should be, I think they should be outside of that end and outside of that end. Paul talked about making the most of every opportunity. And I think every form, pretty much, of reaching people with the gospel is valid. We don't need to polarize it. We don't need to say, oh, we've just got to make church attractive so that everybody comes. And we haven't got to say, oh no, Jesus said in the Great Commission that we've got to go. We've got to do both. And everything in between. Ultimately, it's all a means to an end. So some people would say we need to be missional. Some people would say we need to be attractional. Some people say, well, if we want to be really attractional and people are going to like coming here, then we probably need to dumb things down a bit and quieten things down a bit. Others will say, no, we want to be missional, and so we've got to be unattractive because that's what it's all about. It's about a different gospel. And can you see how these kind of opinions can polarize? Now, if we're going to see breakthrough, we've got to embrace every form of reaching people. Because you're unique, I'm unique, we're all different. We all have different personality types, traits. We all live in different houses with different neighbours. We all work and live and play in different places. And so we have to trust that when the scriptures say that the Lord decides where we live, that he's done that for a reason. And when he says he's able to gift us and anoint us and use us for the extension of his kingdom, we've got to trust that he'll give us the things that we need for the places that he puts us and the times that we need. So I want you to kind of get out of that frame of mind where you think there's only one type of evangelism that is effective. I'll be really honest with you. I love being friends with my friends. And I love reaching people who I've never met. And both of them thrill me when I see people taking steps towards Jesus. But when it comes to people actually coming to faith, when it comes to, if you like, fruitful evangelism, I'm just going to do a quick survey with you, okay? So I want you to stand up if you came to faith in Jesus because you went to some kind of large-scale crusade or event. And that's where you put your trust in Jesus, okay? So we've got a couple of people. Brilliant. Thank you. 3. Okay. Sit yourselves down. Well done. I want you to stand up now if you came to faith because you met a Christian who was sharing their faith in the street. Okay? So we've got nobody in that one. That's an interesting one. Okay, stand up if you came to faith because you were watching maybe a Christian TV channel or listening to Christian radio or reading some Christian literature. And that's how you came to faith. Okay. Okay, stand up if you came to faith because a family member or a friend invited you to come along to church and find out a bit more about Jesus. Okay, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Okay, sit yourselves down, and there'll be other people that came to faith in different ways. But what I want you to notice is that statistics tell us that nearly 80% of people that put their faith in Jesus do it because a friend or family member invited them to church. 80%. That's quite a big statistic. I want you to have a 2-minute discussion on your table. And the discussion is this. Is Citygate Church a church that welcomes people well, or a church that invites people well? Are you welcoming, or are you inviting? You'll all have different opinions, that's fine. Quick 2-minute discussion around your tables. Is Citygate Church a church that welcomes well, or invites people well? Switched on? Yeah, great. Okay, let's have a quick show of hands then. How many of you think Citygate is a church that's really good at welcoming people? Okay, good. The majority. Okay, hands down. How many of you think Citygate is a great church at inviting people? Okay, so 3 or 4 maybe, 5. Okay, this is why tonight is important. Okay, because tonight is about helping us to get better at the bit that we're not so good at. Because if you're anything like my church, we are brilliant at welcoming people. We are famous for our welcome. Pretty much everybody that joins the church say, I joined because I felt so welcome. I had somebody who came from Hong Kong last week, the week after I was, after I was with you on the Wednesday. That Sunday, I was at church. A new family from Hong Kong had come, and I welcomed them. My wife used to live in Hong Kong, so we immediately chatted to them, got to know them, invited them for lunch, and they said, this is the first church we've been to, but we don't need to go to another one. It's obviously the most welcoming church. Okay, so welcoming is something that we're really good at. But here's the challenge. I can only welcome them once they put their foot over the doorstep. Once they can get there and once they're in, I'm brilliant and we're very good at welcoming. The trouble is not what we do when we get them there. The trouble is how we get them to get to the doorstep. That's the biggest challenge that all of us face. So here's the killer question, okay? And the rest of tonight's activity is going to be based on how people all around the world have answered this question and how you answered this question. Because we're going to be looking at a survey that was done in 700 churches in 13 different nations that all answered this one question. And the question is this. And you're going to spend a good 15 minutes in your groups trying to answer this question. You might have different answers, you might have lots of answers. And we're going to share those, think about those, and try and process that in such a way that we get good answers to this question. And the question is this. Why don't we invite our friends to take a closer look at Jesus in our church? Okay, by that I mean, why don't we? If 80% of us in the room tonight came to faith because somebody invited us to church, so the statistics are on our side, and if we know we're very good at welcoming people once they get to us, why don't we invite them? What are the things that stop us from inviting them? What are the things that hinder us from inviting them? If we know that 80% of people become Christians because they've been invited, what are the barriers? What are the blockages? What are the brick walls that we can't seem to come across? What are the things that have happened to us? What have we experienced? What have we thought, said, and done and believed that stops us so often from inviting people to our church to hear about Jesus? Okay? I'm going to give you 15 minutes to really dig into that on your tables, and there's no wrong answers, you know that. If this is something that, if there's been something that's been a barrier for you, then it's been a barrier for you. So be honest with one another. You've got 15 minutes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to hear a few of them, And then I'm going to tell you the global top 10, okay, of why people don't. Right, go for it. Okay, I think we'll stop our conversations there. Now, we're going to find out some of your top answers in a moment. And then we'll jot them down on here so we've got a record of some of the big things that stop us from inviting our friends. But here's just something to consider just as we go into that. I've asked two questions here for those that are a bit further back. What will happen if I invite my friend to church? And what will happen if I don't invite my friend to church? So what will happen if I invite my friend to church? There's really two outcomes, ultimately. They'll either say, yes, please, or they'll say, no, thank you. They're the two possible outcomes. Nobody's really, when I've invited them to church, nobody's punched me. Nobody's slapped me around the face. Nobody's disowned me. Nobody's robbed my phone and run away. People have generally said, thanks, but no thanks. But often people say, yes. What will happen if I don't invite my friends to church? Well, they only have one option. You've taken away their choice of whether to say yes or no. So here's some very highly... My middle son is a master of mathematics. So this is a very complex formula I'm about to draw for you now for how to grow Citygate Church by inviting people. A plus S plus K equals ask. If we take away people's opportunity to choose, we've taken away 80% of our possible fruit, according to the statistics. Right, let's get some of your answers. And then we will get rid of the whiteboard. I love a whiteboard. I particularly love this whiteboard. I have to say, you're a very impressive church when it comes to whiteboards. I just think if I had this on a Sunday morning at Life Church, I'd probably throw my Bible away and just draw. I mean, I've had such fun over the years with this whiteboard. I've probably broken it more times than anything else. The legs have fallen off. I've done a whole survey of the gospel preaching in the book of Acts, every single incident of the gospel preaching, in a big chart on here. Yeah, anyway. So let's get some of your answers. We're going to go from left to right. Okay, so if you hear your one, you've got to cross it off and go down your list. Okay, so... Okay, they've got to be fairly concise because it's only a little whiteboard.
We don't feel we have the depth of relationship to ask them.
Okay. No depth of relationship. Okay, very good. Let's go to the next table.
Fear of rejection.
Fear
Well said.
of rejection. I'm not going to comment on any of these at the moment, okay, but I will when we come to comparing them with the top 10.
We basically had the same lack of close relationship, but our second one was lack of interest in faith or God on their part.
Okay, so they're not interested. They aren't interested. It's funny how we make that decision for them, isn't it?
Our one was that they don't have any connection with the church, no reason for coming.
Okay. No connections. They got you. I'm not going to comment on these, I said. No connection to church. Yeah. Okay, good.
Past disappointment.
Past disappointments. Okay.
Fear that if they don't come, they won't like it.
Okay, fear that if they
They
come, they
comes.
won't like, yeah. Fear that they won't like it. Okay, next one.
Fear of, like, if you talk about your faith at work, that you're not allowed to.
Okay.
So, like, work consequences.
Okay, fear of work consequences. Yeah, that's good. Okay, where are we now?
Hi, yeah. Hello.
Ah, there you are.
Hiya.
Great.
We know that they're unavailable on Sunday at 10 a.m.
Okay. They are busy. They are busy on Sunday. Yep, okay.
Fear that once they get in here, they'll realise the weird part of us.
Fear
Speak for yourself.
of looking weird. Okay, good.
Our own preconceptions of people because of conversations we've had with them and things that they've said in the past that stop us from wanting to ask them.
Okay, so past conversations. I'll put that down. Okay.
Yeah, preconceived ideas of what they think. We make the decision for them as to why they are going to say no.
So we say
have
that we say their no
ideas.
for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. For them. Okay.
Oh, now you give me a dilemma. You've been exhausted. We'll go with cultural barriers.
Okay. Cultural.
So what might be natural to your culture really doesn't work in a different one.
Okay. Great. Is that all the tables had a quick bit of feedback on that? Okay, Russ, let's see if we can break this between us then. Okay, you're going to grab the other end for me. Okay, so we've got some of the things that stop us inviting our friends. It's because we haven't got a deep enough relationship with them. We're frightened that they might reject us. They aren't interested. They've got no connection to the church. We've experienced past disappointments. We're frightened that they won't like it. We're frightened of the consequences with work. They're busy on Sundays. Fear of us looking weird. Past conversations that have led us to maybe back off a little. We say their no for them sometimes, and cultural barriers. Okay, so are you ready for the global top 10? Okay, so like I said, this was 700 churches of all sorts of different denominations in 13 different countries, and they were asked this exact same question that you've been asked tonight. And here's a statistic that I found shocking. Between 80 and 95% of church attendees have no intention of ever inviting anyone. Between 80 and 95% of church attendees have no intention of ever inviting anyone. In growing churches, it was about 80%. In non-growing churches, it was 95%. Nearly all of the congregation had no intention of ever inviting anybody. So we somehow need to flip that, don't we? Wouldn't it be great if the statistics were the other way round and that only 5% didn't invite rather than the 95%. One comment about your feedback and the thing that they have in common with all 10 of the top 10. They all have fear at their root. They all have fear at their root. So that's something that we need to address somehow. If we can address fear in the church, we will win those outside of the church. So the first one, these aren't in an order of they're just the top 10. So the first one is, church is unpredictable and I don't want my friend to suffer. Okay, so we've got that one, haven't we? I'm worried that they'll think we're weird and they'll come here and it'll all be, it's all going to be different and strange and they're going to think I'm strange. Church is unpredictable. I don't want my friend to suffer. Can I just say, it might be so, but God can use anything. I want you to remember where Charles Spurgeon, the great Victorian preacher, got saved. In a freezing, cold, tiny chapel when he was out walking in the snow with a rookie preacher who could barely string 2 words together. And God just got him. See, people coming to faith isn't down to how good church is or how bad church is. There have been times when I've thought, this church meeting is electric. And I've just preached a blinder of a gospel message, and it's like tumbleweed. Nothing happens. And I remember one time John Groves was preaching on money, and somebody got saved. Church will be unpredictable if the Holy Spirit is able to function in a church, but by his very nature, he's good. Second one, they won't go because they said no last time. Okay? They won't want to go, because they said no last time. So they said no once, and we have now condemned them to a life of no answers, without knowing what has been happening in their life, going on in their circumstances. I had a friend who said no to me so many times. He went through 2 marriage breakups, he went through alcoholism, and eventually his no became a yes. Okay, we must never condemn people to a life of no just because they said no last time. In fact, one of my leaders, a lady called Viv, lives opposite me. 2 doors down, we've got another nice couple who aren't Christians. She started having a conversation with them about church. This is Paul and Lucy. And they said, oh yeah, we know about church. Chris and Joe keep inviting us. But then they said this, we haven't been yet. And that word yet means I am never going to withhold the invitation. Because one day, Paul and Lucy's answer is going to be, yeah, we went. So I'm praying for that. But we must not give up because we've received a no. Because a no isn't a bad thing. It might just be, as somebody said, they're busy on Sunday morning. It's not a rejection. And if we give up every time things don't seem to go our way and we get a rejection, we'll never do anything. Let me give you a few examples. Alexander Graham Bell, they absolutely laughed at him when he came up with the notion of a telephone. Now we're all carrying them around in our pockets and stuck to our ears all day. Christopher Columbus, they mocked him because they said he was going to sail off the edge of the world. But he didn't give up. Henry Ford, they said to him, who needs a car? There aren't any roads anyway. The Wright brothers, they said Orville Wright. They said, Orville, that thing ain't ever going to get up in the air. Mankind were not designed to fly. Resilience was what they had. Every single one of them had resilience. They ignored the setbacks, they ignored the no's, they ignored the naysayers, and they changed the world. And we dare not make decisions for people by saying, oh, they'd never come. They said no last time, they'll never come. Please don't take that decision out of their hands. If Jesus can get hold of an unlikely person like the Apostle Paul, or an unlikely dope-smoking hippie like me, or somebody strange and odd like you, he can get hold of absolutely anybody. So we must not take their no's as rejection. Actually, just for a moment, just picture in your mind someone who has been a no when you've asked them or invited them to someone. And just in that moment, when you're picturing them, just imagine you asking them again. I don't want you to worry about what comes out of their mouth, but I just want you to put yourself in the position where you allow God to give you faith to go back again to that person that said no last time. Even jot their name down, stick it in your pocket, pray for them tomorrow morning, whatever it is you want to do. Okay, number three, we have no non-Christian friends. That's number 3. Now, there's 3 options with that. If it's true, then as a church, we really need to look at the culture of the church. We need to ask the question, how did we become a ghetto? My inkling is it's not true. We say it, but it's not true. When people say that, it usually isn't, which leaves us with the other 2 options. Either we're lying to ourselves and kidding ourselves and using it as a self-preservation exercise. You know, I don't need to invite anybody because I haven't really got any friends that aren't Christians anyway. Or we do know some people who are not Christians, and we just need to overcome the fear and ask. I think you all went to a supermarket, and I can pretty much guarantee you that some of the people that served you wouldn't have been Christians. All of you will have gone to a coffee shop or a restaurant or a cafe or a pub. Do you know something about people that aren't Christians? They're blooming everywhere. Everywhere.
Maybe because they think of England as a Christian country and they think non-Christians being Christians.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's a big challenge with growing up in England because people assume Christian faith often. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah. Well, you believe in Jesus? No, it just says C of E on my birth certificate. That's what I was baptized when I was tiny. Well, you and I have to teach them, don't we? Okay, number 4. You'll like this one, Russ. It's the church leader's job. Or maybe the evangelist's job. Or the alpha team's job. It goes like this. All of us are busy people. We're all out at work all the time. We're cash rich, but we're time poor. So our thoughts go like this. Okay, I'm out at work all day. And then I've got the family to look after when I come home. Whereas Russell, we've released him to do the mission of the church. We pay his salary. Don't you know that? We pay his salary. We've resourced him and released him to do it. I mean, what else has he got to do all week? Let's be honest. I know I'm caricaturing, but I tell you what, we put an awful lot of expectation on leaders and on others. And it's too much. The mission of this church is not the sole responsibility of the leaders, the alpha leaders, the evangelists, the pastors, the teachers. We cannot outsource our mission. You cannot outsource your mission. Okay? It's like a football team, you know. You know what it's like with football? If the team wins, the players get applauded. If the team loses, the manager gets sacked. We need to be those who are in the game and playing. We can't outsource that to anybody else. So if you're thinking, okay, this isn't my gift or it isn't my responsibility, I just want to say it's all of our responsibilities. Acts 2 verse 32. God has raised this very Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses to that fact. All. Number 5, you got this one. It could damage my friendship. It could damage my friendship. You know, Mark Twain once said this: I'm an old man and I've known a great many troubles, but most of them never happened. See, we worry about things that probably aren't going to happen. I have shared my faith with strangers and with friends. The worst I've had is like a... That's the worst I've had in 30 years of sharing my faith. I didn't die. It didn't kill me. I'm not picking myself up off the floor. And if friends genuinely are friends, then they already know you. And so anything you say to them is going to have added value because they know you. And so if you were to take a moment to say, can I just take a few minutes to just tell you what makes me tick? Tell you why I get up in the morning. Because it's really important to me, and you're the kind of friend that I want to share it with. Most people, faith or no faith, will respect that. And who knows what kind of door that could open. But we've got this fear of somehow breaking or diminishing a relationship. I might lose a friend. In reality, I just can't think of any examples of that actually happening. True, the relationship may change. It may change. It may take your friendship to a whole nother level. And what do friends do? They love people. They love one another. And to withhold this gift from someone that you love isn't friendship. So really, ultimately, this is a fear thing, again. It's fear of man. It's fear of what will this person now think of me if I tell them this about me? Fear, fear, fear. And that will stop us inviting because we're too worried about how other people perceive us. Aren't we self-centered? Number 6, I'm worried that people at church will think my friend isn't our type. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I wouldn't have thought of that one. I'm worried that people at church will think that my friend is not our type. You think about Jesus encountering the woman at the well. She was an unlikely case, wasn't she? An unlikely choice. But then, I'm an unlikely choice. You're an unlikely choice. We're all unlikely choice. Actually, turn to the person next to you and say, you're an unlikely choice. Go on. You're an unlikely choice. But here's the truth. You were chosen. You were chosen. Unlikely though it was, you were chosen. And so might the friend that you want to invite also be chosen. I read a great book called No Perfect People Allowed by John Burke. And his opening chapter begins with this question. He says this: what do a Buddhist, a biker couple, a gay rights activist, a transient, a high-tech engineer, a Muslim, a 20-something single mum, a Jew, a couple living together, and an atheist all have in common? His answer: they're the future church. Yeah? They're the future church. All the unlikely cases. We don't need to worry that your church friends will think that your friend is not your type. There ain't a type. We're one weird bunch of misfits. And they'll find family amongst us. Number 7, I'm too timid or reticent. My personality type is too introspective or shy. That can be a real thing, and there are real times in all of our lives, aren't there, when we have to overcome fear and employ faith and courage. Now, here's something that I think we've kind of implicitly believed, is that to share your faith with people, you have to be an extrovert. You don't. You don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to be a strong personality type. You don't have to be clever with words or wise or articulate. You don't have to have loads of Bible knowledge. Some, yes. You just have to be willing. There's many introverts that need reaching for Jesus as there are extroverts. And they're going to find it much easier talking to you than they are me. Yeah? Don't let your personality type limit you. Of course, you don't want to be pushy, but you can be quietly confident. Remember, fear does not come from God. So if our timidity leads us to be fearful, somehow we've strayed from personality into sin. You understand that? If we allow fear to dominate us, because fear does not come from him. Think about Peter before Pentecost. Like absolutely terrified. Denying Christ, even to a girl who was just stood there. I don't know. Fearful. Fear. And then what happened to him? Holy Spirit. Boom. Peter's out there. You Jews, you just crucified him. Our Messiah. I mean, talk about boldness. What was the big difference? Personality? No. The filling of the Spirit. So if you feel fearful, reticent, shy, nervous, timid, ask for the Spirit to come and fill you again. Daily. Go on being filled with the Spirit. Power, love, confidence is what comes with the Spirit. Number 8. I don't invite my friends to come and find out more about Jesus and the church because faith is a private thing. This is a big issue in the UK. It is a really big issue in the UK. Perhaps we don't think it. In churches like ours, we don't think of it so much. But if you go back one generation, my parents' generation, faith across the whole country was a private thing. It was one of the things that you didn't talk about in the pub. Okay, it would have been very culturally un-PC to talk about faith. To talk about anything serious, really. My question is this. When did it become like that? When did faith become an internal thing that we couldn't talk about in public? Because from the beginning, Christianity was a public invitation. It was always a gospel invitation. When did it become a private thing? See, science is public, arts are public, politics are public. Why should faith be private? We've believed a lie and we end up compromising and treading gently when it comes to sharing our faith. Softly. I'll talk about church, but I won't mention Jesus. You know, we kind of get a little bit shy, a little bit ashamed, a little bit reticent. Think, I've mentioned that I went to church on Sunday. I think I'll leave it there for now. Do you know what I mean? We get that thing where we constantly feel this external expectation and pressure that we are not allowed to talk about this. Permission to speak. Okay? Citygate Church, permission to speak. You can talk about it. You can share your faith. You can say stuff about your life. Everybody else is doing it all the time and their lives are not nearly as interesting as yours. Okay, they'll tell you, I mean, how many times do you go onto social media and see the rubbish people have eaten for dinner? They're sharing their rubbish with you. You share some of your good stuff with them. Okay? Faith is not a private thing. It's always been a public invitation. Number 9. You got this one. I don't want to be seen as strange. Reality check. You're as batty as they come. Okay, you will appear strange. How do you think Noah felt? No, I want you to build it. What's he doing? He's building a boat in the middle of nowhere. There's not even a river. There's no lake. There's no sea. Why is he building a boat? I mean, they mocked him and mocked him and mocked him. Sarah, she looked pretty strange buying maternity clothes at 90. You know, the Israelites going around the walls of Jericho blowing trumpets. What are they doing? Don't know. Strange. The whole thing is strange. Peter. I think I might just step out the boat. Don't do it, Peter! You're going to look weird. You're going to just go down. You're going to get so wet, Peter. We all are going to look weird. Even David, think about David. His wife was ashamed of his strangeness. He said, you know what? I'll be even more undignified than this. I'll be humiliated in my own eyes. You know, you are going to look strange. I'll tell you why. Because the message that we bring is the strangest message. I mean, it's utterly, utterly strange. This story, this narrative where God becomes a man, comes to earth, lives perfectly, dies horrifically, raised from death to life, goes back to heaven, sends his Spirit, who then goes and fills his followers, who carry on, empowered by that same Spirit, to do the same thing and the same message that Jesus had been doing. He's gone back to heaven. One day he's then going to come back, and then we're all going to rise. I mean, it's just bonkers. The whole thing is nutty as a fruitcake. But it's also true. It's also true. And we live in a world that is desperate for truth, however strange it might appear. Now, when faith comes, strangeness goes. I thought Christians were the weirdest bunch in the world till I was one. When faith comes, strangeness goes. All of a sudden, that was my family. All of a sudden, this was my support network, my friendship group. It's the place I went to for help and healing, teaching, encouragement. And I tell you what, I was a new man. Yes, because of Jesus, but also because of the church. This bunch of strangers who became family. Yeah. You will look strange, so get used to it. Number 10. Why don't I invite them? They might ask me something difficult about my faith. It's another fear, isn't it? It's a fear of inadequacy. It's a fear of cross-examination. You know, in law, you know what a cross-examination is, don't you? When there's more detailed questioning of a witness in court. The witness is up there, and whenever somebody's doing, you know, a barrister or whatever is doing a cross-examination, that it's always like a kind of digging down into the depths. It starts off, you know, can you just confirm your name? Easy, can do that, name. And then bit by bit, it gets deeper and the questions get harder. Where were you on the night of the incident? What were you wearing? And as the cross-examiner drills down into the details, you'll be asked every single detail of what you actually saw and experienced. What did you actually witness on the night of the event? Remember what Jesus calls us to be. Witnesses. Now here's the good thing. Because you were there, you can answer those questions. And you're probably the only person that can answer those questions because you were a witness. You were there. You saw it. You experienced it. You felt it. Now, some questions are going to be simple. Some questions are going to be more tricky. Some questions might even be hostile. But we cannot be part of a church and not be a witness. You can't enter the church and join a witness protection program. Okay? You are a witness. You have seen, touched, experienced, felt the love of God in your heart. If you're ever stuck for how to answer, tell people what you've experienced. Tell them the day it happened. Tell them the last thing that God did in your life, the last time he provided for you, the last time you experienced his love, the last time he healed you, the last thing that happened in church that made you go, wow. We are all witnesses. We do not have the permission to deny. The best solution to the fear thing, though, is the presence thing. Perfect love casts out fear. In Isaiah, fear not, for I am with you. And then when Jesus inaugurated the Great Commission, he said, surely I am with you until the very end of the age. You see, when we understand that we are witnesses, but we're not standing alone in the dock. We're standing with our brother, our friend, the one who died and rose again at our side. His presence is promised with us. So all these things that we're fearful of, I don't care if my friends reject me. They don't, but I wouldn't care if they did, because I've received the greatest love I could ever have. I've got the greatest friend already I could ever have. Now, I'm not going to push my friends away, but I am not going to allow the fear of their response to prevent me from sharing the best thing I've ever discovered. You understand the magnitude of this is so much bigger than the tiny amount of fear that the enemy can just start to stir in your mind and stop you. Great, I've managed to zip the Christians up. They're like Arctic rivers, frozen at the mouth. Every time you feel that little bit of fear coming up in your mind, I want you to remember that if we can solve the problem of fear in the church, we can be fruitful outside of the church. So we're going to have a little bit more discussion for a few minutes, and the question that I want you to talk around in your group is this. Which of those things that we've talked about, either the ones that you came up with or the top 10 that were from the 700 churches in 13 nations, which one of those most resonates with you? Which one of those do you think has most affected you, impinged you, hindered you from sharing your faith or inviting your friends to come and find out more about Jesus and the church? Can you give any examples of when that's happened? Okay, so I want you just for, let's say, 5 minutes or so, group conversation, which one for you is the fear that hinders most? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, if we could just start drawing that conversation to a close. What I think could probably be quite helpful is for you, if you have identified one particular thing, maybe jot that down and take it home and make that an item to pray into as well this evening, as well as the one person that came to your mind when we were talking about kind of unlikely people or people that had said no. Take away something that you can work on as well in terms of fear. Okay, we're going to come in for a landing in a moment. I just want to give you 4 steps out of despair that we're so fruitless into a place of faith and confidence. And I want to redefine what success looks like for Citygate Church in this whole arena. And then we're going to do one little activity to close. So steps, how do you move forward? Understanding that fear is at the root of our inability to articulate an invitation. And most of that fear is small compared to the beauty of knowing Christ. How do we overcome that? Firstly, with the fear aspect, we need to recognize it, name it, understand it, acknowledge it, and then reject it. Like we do with all fears, all irrational fears. We can even use it to our advantage. I'm frightened that my friend, because they said no last time, will say no this time. How do I turn that to my advantage? I am never going to stop inviting that mate. I'm going to bring them before God when I say my prayers in the morning, when I'm reading my Bible before I go to sleep. I'm going to name them. I'm going to petition God for their salvation. And then I'm going to deliver the bombshell invitation every time I see them. Do you know what? You're a really good friend. Come with me to something. Could change your life the way it's changed mine. They may laugh. They may mock you. Remember last time I was here, I told you about my friend Pete, who was a university friend of mine. I invited him on 18 Alpha courses. He came to 3. Still wasn't a Christian. One day, I said, Pete, I'm going to sit you down in the pub and we're going to talk this thing through. And we did. This is after we didn't done the Beer Mat Gospel. That was Pete, who I did the Beer Mat Gospel for. On the way back from the pub, Pete sat down in my car. He put his seatbelt on and he went, "Go on then, Chris. Evangelise me." I said, "Pete, you've probably had about 4 pints. You'll be on making any sense to anybody. But we'll go out again next week and I'll talk to you about it then." You know? How many years? Probably 18, 19 years of his no's. But it made the yes so much sweeter. So recognize the fear, reject it, use it to your advantage. The thing you've written down that is your particular battle, you can now overcome that battle. Remember, fear doesn't come from God. Employ faith. The second thing is faith. Cultivate faith in this area. If I invite 10 friends, one of them might come. If 80% of people that come to church and hear about Jesus come because they're invited by a friend, then the odds are in my favour. So there's a chance that somebody's going to come. faith. Trust God with new relationships, new friendships, work situations, people that move in next door. Trust him that he's ordained for these divine appointments. And he's going to bring people into your path that need to hear of his love. Cultivate faith. You are his missionary. You are his mouthpiece. You are his witness. You are his hands and feet. You are however you want to describe it, you're the only bit of this whole God thing that person might ever meet. Don't miss your opportunities. God can use you. Have faith. And confidence. Confidence. You see, if you've got confidence, you can have a no, and it can make you go, oh, no, ow, oh, okay. And then you bounce back up again. You go, okay, well, we'll try again next week, or I'll ask somebody else. You don't take the no as a personal rejection, because it's never a personal rejection. The gospel's foolishness. It's a stumbling block. Of course they're going to say no sometimes. Because it's going to make them change their life or change their thinking. And people, I don't want to change. Oh, so you've got the monopoly on wisdom in life, have you? People miss it. But when a glimmer of a door opens, and that you open for them, they can walk through. Learn to cope with a no. Jesus sent out the 72. He said to them, look, if they reject you, shake the dust off your feet. Move on. Move on. Don't crumble in a heap. Oh no, we went there and they didn't receive us or our message. Let's just bury ourselves in a hole in the ground here. And I know Jesus said we've got to make disciples of all the nations, but can we just have a bath or something? Don't crumble at the no. Shake the dust off your feet and move on. And fear God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I think Terry Virgo put up a tweet this morning and he said something like, when we say fear God, I think we've forgotten what fear means. And we make too little of it. Something like that. I know what he means, because we explain away the fear of God. We say, well, it's a good fear, it's a clean fear, and that's all true, that's all good. But it's also a fear, and we don't have to have fear of man when we've got fear of God. If we've got God with us, who can stand against us of any consequence? We do not need to fear anyone or anything. God is for us, God is with us. So, redefining success. Okay, because so often we think success is different than what... Here's a familiar conversation that I've had with other leaders. How's your Alpha course going? Rubbish. What do you mean, rubbish? Well, out of the whole church, we only had 10 guests turn up. That doesn't sound like rubbish. Well, by the time we got to week 3, there was only one left. So we've decided we're not going to do Alpha next term. What are we saying? You see, when we define our efforts as failure, we give up. What we're actually saying when we have a conversation like that is that the one doesn't matter. Hang on a minute. One person came and heard about Jesus. Came to faith, presumably. You know, we know that Jesus left the 99 and went after the one. Every single one matters. But when we say that, we're also saying implicitly that the results are somehow down to us. We're saying that somehow it's our success or our failure, therefore we're not going to do it because we have failed. You know, if you read the parable of the talents, we've got to understand that results are God's business. Our part is to be faithful with what he's entrusted to us. And I think if we read the parable of the sower correctly, it's God, isn't it, who gives the growth, not us. Or as a friend of mine said, we can sow, we can mow, but we can't grow. We're defining success wrongly and unbiblically. You see, however we might phrase it or articulate it, what we usually say of success in the whole notion of inviting people to something is that success is this: one person inviting one person and that person saying yes. That's how we define success. That's the story we tell. I invited my friend to Alpha and they came. Hooray! I shared my faith with my friend at work and they became a Christian. Hooray! That's not success. That's not success. And it's certainly not our success. You see, what we're saying is that success is one person inviting one person and that person saying yes. Which is crazy because we can do absolutely nothing about this bit. Nothing can we do to change that. So how can we either succeed or fail if we can do nothing to change it? We have no power to influence the yes or the no. The bit that we have influence over is this bit and this bit. I invited my friend to church. Yeah? That's the only bit we can control. We can't control whether they say yes or no. You know, it's hard enough to invite somebody to something without adding on the extra pressure of having to get a yes. Isn't it? I mean, if we're piling that pressure onto ourselves, I'm going to ask him, and I'm going to put it nicely, and I'm going to say that, and then, no. It hurts. But if we absolve ourselves of the responsibility for the bit that they and God are responsible for, then we can start to redefine success, can't we? You see, the only failure is not to try, not to do our bit, to bury our talents under the soil. That's the only true failure. And that's why we're so scared, because we've been brought up in a world and a culture that is terrified of failure. We are terrified of failure, whether that's at home, at work, even at church, because failure hurts. But you see, one person inviting one person is not a failure. One person inviting one person is a success, because that's the bit that we've been asked to do. Simply that. Forget that. We are so terrified of what people might think when we fail. If at first you don't succeed, hide all evidence that you tried. This is your new definition of success. And if you remember this and nothing else today, I'll be happy. It's a definition given by Michael Harvey in his book, Creating a Culture of Invitation. Success is one person inviting one person and leaving the yes and no to God. Success for Citygate in creating a culture of invitation is one person inviting one person and leaving the yes and no to God. You see, if we define success that way, we are dealing with the fear in the church. We are ditching it, and we are genuinely expressing faith in a God who saves, because we're trusting him to do the bit that only he can do. One activity to do, and I want you to have one takeaway. So I want you just to have a 2-minute conversation on your table, and I want you to say, what is my one takeaway from tonight? What is the one thing that sticks with me, the one thing I'm going to remember, the one thing I'm going to pray into, or the one thing that I'm going to think about, or the one thing that is going to change? Have a 2-minute discussion about that, and then we'll do this little activity together to finish off. Okay. We're just coming up to your 2 minutes for that one. I want to make one final comment, and then we're going to do this activity. If you genuinely want to create a culture of invitation, you have to change the questions that you ask and the stories that you share from here on in. So you have to be able to share the story of you inviting your friend. What's the Alpha launch? When's that? 6th of October. So the story is now you've got to say to one another, I took one of those cards on Wednesday night and I left it on my boss's desk. And everybody that hears that has to resist the temptation to say, is he coming? We don't know. Okay? That wasn't the success bit. The success bit is that somebody took it tonight and left it on their boss's desk, or put it through their neighbour's door, or left it on the bus, or gave it to their best friend, or their daughter, or their son, or their cleaner, or the lady at Tesco's. That's success. Not did they say thank you, did they say yes, did they say no, did they come, did they get saved. None of that is in your hands, so please don't pick up any responsibility for the rest of it. So you have to change the questions you ask. You cannot ask the follow-up question. Oh, you know that boss that you did they come? Okay, we don't need to know that. If they were there, you'd know about it, because we'd be then telling the rest of the story. Okay, success. And what I want you to do is I want you to celebrate success, because what you celebrate, you replicate. So if you hear one of your friends say, oh, I managed to give one of those Alpha invitations to my sister. Brilliant. Well done. Well done. You've discharged your duty. Let's pray for them. Yeah? That's how you cultivate a culture of invitation. Very last thing. Take one of these. I love these because they can fit in your wallet or your purse. And when you want to share the gospel with somebody, it's a very easy thing to do. So what I want you to do is I want you to take it with the words, the gap, upside down and facing you. Upside down and facing you. The words, the gap, in big, upside down and facing you. Okay? Got that? Then you fold the top down to the very bottom. And you crease it along the middle. So now the words, the gap, should be the right way up and away from you. Okay? Got that far? Now I want you to open it back up again, and I want you to fold the top down to the crease. And I want you to fold the bottom up to the crease. And crease them. And then you very simply fold it over. There should be some on all the tables, hopefully. If not, grab some from a table. So you should end up with a little thing that says the gap on the front, like that. Okay, everybody got a little thing like that? That's small enough to tuck into your wallet or your purse. And you can use it, you see, because the way I would use this is if I had a couple of minutes with somebody and you don't know where it could be, or when it could be, or what it could be, or who it could be. But you've got something. And the reason I did this one was because it's not dependent on lots of language. I find that when I chat to people, often they're non-English speakers, and so this is quite pictorial, and it's not full of, there's one scripture basically. So I will explain that this is a little thing called the gap, because there's a gap between us and God. And I might say to the person, you don't hear God, do you? You don't talk to God, you don't think about God every day. That's because there's a gap between you and God. You know, when we're separated, we don't hear and see and talk. And then I'll open the top bit up. And I'll say, look at that bit. There's us and God in the purple. That represents what we were supposed to have. We were supposed to be with God, together with God, close by God, in relationship with God. That's how he made us, to be with him, to enjoy his company, to hear from him, talk to him, love him, and be loved by him. But unfortunately, we chose to reject God, and that separated us from God. That's why there's a gap. And you can talk about sin, you can talk about whatever you want, but what I usually point out from that one is the guy's head is down. Because we're never content when we're separated from the God that loves us and made us. Just as any orphan is never content when they're separated from a parent, or any dog is content when they're separated from their owner, or any child who is lost in the supermarket. Whenever we're separated from our source of protection and love, we're never content. So, I lift up the top one. We try and do all sorts of things to try and get back that contentment and that peace. Sometimes we do it by helping other people or by being religious or by being good. But what you can see from this picture is as that man starts to try and walk up the steps of his own making, the only thing that's going to happen is he's going to fall down in the middle. He can't, by his own efforts, come back to a place where he's in relationship with God. And ultimately will be separated forever. And when the Bible talks about being separated forever, it uses the word death. Death is an eternal separation. And it says that's what we get for rejecting God. Wages are what we get for what we do. What we do is reject God. The result of that, the wages of that, the thing we get paid for that, is that ultimately we are spiritually and physically separated from God forever. And you can see he's walking away. And then the next is the good news. The wages of sin is death. So what we deserve is our wages, what we've earned. But there's a gift that God wants to give us. And that gift is the gift of eternal life in Jesus. You see, Jesus made a way through the cross by his death and his resurrection to take us and somehow give his death replaced ours. His death satisfied God in our place. We get to be forgiven and we get to come back into relationship with God. And there's a very short prayer on there. And I would say probably I have gone through this. I think probably thousands of people have sat and just listened to me for 2 minutes on a park bench or, sitting with a friend. And I would say I've probably prayed the prayer that is on the back, which is a prayer, a first step of repentance and faith. It doesn't mean they're necessarily a Christian, but it means they've understood the message enough to want to pray. I don't know, hundreds of people, just from a simple bit of paper. So I don't want you to underestimate these little things, because they just help us. They help us to articulate the gospel, they help us to share the gospel. And sometimes I look at it in my wallet and I think, that hasn't been out of my wallet for a week or two. And it reminds me that I'm a witness. It reminds me that God's called me to share what he's given me with others. So pop it in your wallet or your purse. Next time you see it, have a think about it. Take an opportunity, take a risk. Don't let fear grab hold of you. God bless you. Thanks.